My daughter's drawing exposed what my wife has been hiding in the basement. The drawing was taped to the refrigerator when I got home from work. I almost walked past it like I did with most of Sophie's artwork. The endless parade of stick figures and rainbow houses that cycled through our kitchen weekly. But something about this one made me stop. The colors were wrong. Dark browns and grays instead of her usual bright pinks and yellows. And the figures weren't smiling. They never smiled in Sophie's drawings anymore, but this was different. This was disturbing. The picture showed our house in cross-section like a dollhouse. Rooms stacked on top of each other. The kitchen where my wife Claire spent most of her time. The living room where Sophie played. Our bedroom on the second floor. And then the basement, rendered in heavy black crayon strokes. Inside the basement, Sophie had drawn a figure. Small, hunched, with long dark hair covering most of its face. Next to it, she'd written in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, "The sad lady who lives downstairs." I pulled the drawing off the fridge and stared at it under the fluorescent light. The sad lady who lives downstairs. We didn't have anyone living downstairs. Our basement was unfinished, just concrete floors and exposed beams, boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture we kept meaning to donate. Claire used it for storage and occasionally for her pottery, though she'd mostly given that up after Sophie was born. I tried to remember the last time I'd actually been down there. Weeks? Months? Claire had asked me to stay out of her workspace, said she needed one area of the house that was completely hers, and I'd respected that boundary without question. Sophie was in the living room watching cartoons, her blonde hair still damp from her bath. She had Claire's delicate features and my blue eyes, and lately she'd been quieter than usual, more withdrawn. Claire said it was normal for kids her age, growing pains and adjusting to school, but looking at this drawing, I wondered what else we'd been dismissing as normal. I sat down beside her on the couch, holding the picture carefully. "Hey, Bug, I saw your drawing. It's very detailed. You want to tell me about it?" She glanced at the paper and then back at the TV, her expression unchanged. "It's our house," she said simply. I nodded, keeping my voice casual. "I can see that. And who's this person you drew in the basement?" Sophie pulled her knees up to her chest, a gesture she'd started doing recently when she was uncomfortable. "The sad lady. She's always down there. Sometimes I hear her crying when I'm trying to sleep." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean crying? Like Mommy when she's watching sad movies?" Sophie shook her head. "Different. Like she's hurt or scared. Mommy says I'm not supposed to tell you because it would upset you, but Mrs. Kowalski at school said if something makes us feel bad, we should tell a grown-up we trust." She looked at me with those serious blue eyes. "You won't get mad at Mommy, will you?" I forced myself to breathe normally, to keep my expression neutral, even as alarm bells started ringing in my head. "No, Bug, I won't get mad, but I need you to tell me everything about the sad lady, okay? When did you first see her?" Sophie's face scrunched up in concentration. "I don't see her, Daddy. Mommy doesn't let me go in the basement, but I hear her. At night, mostly, and sometimes during the day when you're at work. Mommy brings her food and I hear them talking, but I can't understand the words because the door is closed." She paused, then added quietly, "Sometimes the lady screams. Not loud screaming like when someone's playing. Scared screaming, like the sound-trapped animals make in movies. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. I was aware of my heartbeat, loud in my ears, and the sound of cartoon characters laughing from the TV seemed obscene against what Sophie was describing. "Does Mommy know you can hear these things?" Sophie nodded. "I asked her once who was down there and she said it was just the house settling, making noises. But houses don't cry, Daddy. Houses don't say words." My hands were shaking. I set the drawing down on the coffee table and pulled Sophie into a hug, feeling her small body relax against me. "You did the right thing telling me, Bug. I'm going to check on this, okay? But I need you to do something for me. I need you to go play in your room for a little while." She pulled back and looked at me with an expression too knowing for 7 years old. "Are you going to the basement?" I nodded. "Just to look around, to make sure everything's okay." Sophie's face crumpled and she grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Don't go down there, Daddy. Please. The sad lady might hurt you, or Mommy might get really angry. She gets so angry now when I ask questions." The fear in her voice was real and visceral, and I realized my daughter had been living with this terror for God knows how long, carrying it alone because we'd taught her not to question her mother's explanations. I heard the garage door opening. Claire was home from her errands. I had maybe 30 seconds before she walked in and saw me holding this drawing, before she saw the knowledge written all over my face. I made a split-second decision. "Sophie, go to your room right now and close the door. Don't come out until I tell you, okay? no matter what you hear. She ran, her small feet pounding up the stairs, and I heard her door click shut just as Claire came through the kitchen entrance, arms full of grocery bags, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing the yoga pants and sweater that made her look like any other suburban mom running weekend errands. She smiled when she saw me, that warm, familiar smile I'd fallen in love with 9 years ago. "Hey, you're home early. Can you help me with the rest of the bags?" I stood up, leaving the drawing on the EIJ coffee table where she couldn't miss it. "In a minute, we need to talk." Her smile faltered slightly. "About what?" I picked up the drawing and held it out to her. "About the sad lady living in our basement." The change in her expression was instant and total. The warmth drained from her face, replaced by something cold and calculating. She set the grocery bags down with deliberate care, not breaking eye contact with me. "Sophie drew that?" The way she said it, like Sophie had committed some betrayal, made my skin crawl. "Yes, and she told me she's been hearing someone crying down there. Someone screaming. Claire, what the hell is going on?" She moved toward me, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "Ben, listen to me. This isn't what you think. I can explain everything, but you need to stay calm and let me talk." I stepped back, maintaining distance between us. "Then talk. Explain why our daughter thinks there's someone imprisoned in our basement. Explain why she's terrified of what you might do if she tells me about it." Claire's jaw tightened. "She's not imprisoned. God, Ben, do you really think I'm some kind of monster? She's my sister." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Your sister? Claire, you're an only child. You told me your parents died when you were young, that you had no siblings, no extended family. That's what you've told me for 9 years. She laughed, a bitter sound without humor. "No, Ben, that's what you wanted to believe. You never asked many questions about my past. You liked the idea of the mysterious girl with the tragic background. It was romantic." I felt the ground shifting under me, my entire understanding of my wife's history dissolving. "Stop deflecting. If she's your sister, why is she locked in our basement? Why have I never met her? Why doesn't Sophie know her aunt exists?" Claire walked to the couch and sat down, suddenly looking exhausted. "Because Eleanor is dangerous. She's been dangerous since we were teenagers. Our parents didn't die, Ben. Eleanor killed them." The words seemed to echo in the silence that followed. I heard the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of Sophie moving around upstairs, the normal sounds of our house that now felt like a stage set concealing something grotesque. "You're telling me your sister murdered your parents, and you've been keeping her prisoner in our basement? For how long?" Claire met my eyes, defiant. 3 years, since right before Sophie started kindergarten. Eleanor was released from the psychiatric hospital where she'd been since she was 16. The state said she was rehabilitated, no longer a danger to herself or others, but I knew better. I knew what she was capable of. I sat down in the chair across from her, my legs suddenly unable to support me. 3 years. We've been living in this house for 3 years, and you've had your sister locked in the basement and never told me? Claire leaned forward, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she used when explaining things to Sophie. "I was protecting our family. Eleanor isn't stable, Ben. She has episodes where she becomes violent. The psychiatric system failed her, failed our family. If I hadn't taken her in, she would have ended up homeless or worse. This way, I can make sure she's safe and can't hurt anyone." The logic was insane, but Claire presented it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "Safe? Sophie says she hears her crying and screaming. That doesn't sound safe, Claire. That sounds like torture." Her eyes flashed with anger. "Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what I've been through, what I've had to do to keep this family protected. Eleanor is fed, she has a bed, she has books and a TV. She's better off than she would be anywhere else." I stood up, moving toward the basement door in the kitchen. Claire jumped up and blocked my path. "Ben, wait, you can't just go down there. She doesn't know you. She might react badly." I looked at my wife and saw a stranger. "Get out of my way, Claire." She didn't move. "Ben, please, let me explain more first. Let me prepare you for what you're going to see." I pushed past her, not roughly but firmly, and opened the basement door. She grabbed my arm. "Ben, she's not well. She looks sick because she refuses to eat sometimes. That's not my fault. I try to help her, but she fights me on everything." I pulled my arm free and started down the stairs. The basement was dark, lit only by the light spilling from the kitchen. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. The space looked wrong. A partition had been built across the middle of the basement, creating a room within a room. The walls were thick plywood, and there was a door with multiple locks on the outside. This hadn't been here when we'd moved in. Claire must have had it constructed, maybe told me she was having some kind of storage area built while I was at work. I'd never questioned it, because I'd never come down here. The realization of my own complicity, my willingness to ignore parts of my own house, made me sick. Claire came down behind me. The door is locked. You'll need the key. I turned to face her. Give it to me. She hesitated, then pulled a key ring from her pocket. Ben, I'm serious about her being unstable. Don't get too close to her. Don't promise her anything. She manipulates people. It's what she does. I took the keys and approached the door. As I got closer, I heard it. A soft, whimpering sound, like an animal in pain. I looked back at Claire, who stood at the bottom of the stairs with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I unlocked the first deadbolt, then the second, then the third. The door swung open. The smell hit me first. Unwashed body, stale air, and something else, something medicinal and wrong. The room was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet. There was a single bed with gray sheets, a folding chair, a small table with books stacked on it, and a TV mounted on the wall showing some nature documentary with the sound off. In the corner was a bucket with a lid. The walls were bare except for scratch marks near the door, long gouges in the plywood like someone had been trying to claw their way out. On the bed was a woman. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment I thought I was seeing Claire. Same dark hair, same delicate bone structure. But where Claire was healthy and vital, this woman was gaunt, her skin pale and almost translucent, her eyes sunken with dark circles underneath. She was wearing a stained nightgown and her feet were bare. Around her ankle was a chain that connected to a bolt in the concrete floor, long enough to reach the bed and the bucket but nothing else. She stared at me with an expression of such desperate hope that it broke something inside me. Are you real? She asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Or is she making me see you? I moved toward her slowly, the way you'd approach a scared animal. I'm real. My name is Ben. I'm Claire's husband. Eleanor's face crumpled, and she started to cry, deep wrenching sobs that shook her thin frame. She said no one would ever come. She said you didn't know I was here. She said if I screamed too loud, she'd take away my books. I turned to look at Claire, who stood in the doorway watching us with that same unreadable expression. Get her out of that chain. Right now. Claire shook her head. The chain is for everyone's safety. She tried to attack me last month. She can't be trusted without restraints. Eleanor was still crying, but she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. That's a lie. I tried to stop her from giving me the pills. They make me sleepy all the time. I can't think straight when she gives me the pills. The picture was becoming clearer and more horrifying. What pills? I demanded, looking at Claire. She sighed like I was being unreasonably difficult. Antipsychotics, the same medications she was prescribed at the hospital. She needs them to stay stable, but she refuses to take them voluntarily, so I have to mix them into her food sometimes. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and righteous. You're drugging her against her will? Claire, do you hear yourself? This is kidnapping. This is false imprisonment. This is abuse. Claire's composure finally cracked. This is survival. You don't know what she did, Ben. You don't know what it was like finding our parents. She stabbed them while they slept, 23 times each. I was 12 years old, and I woke up to blood everywhere and Eleanor standing over them with the knife, just standing there like she was waiting for someone to tell her what to do next. Her voice broke. The state took her away and I went into foster care. For 15 years I had nightmares about that night, and then they released her, said she was cured, and expected me to just accept that the monster who destroyed my childhood was suddenly safe to be around. Eleanor was shaking her head violently. I was sick, Claire. I was 16 and hearing voices, and our parents didn't believe in psychiatric help. They thought prayer would fix me. I don't remember that night. I don't remember any of it. But I've spent 15 years in hospitals trying to get better, and this is what I get? Locked in your basement like an animal? I looked between the two sisters, seeing the shared trauma that had twisted into this nightmare. Claire, even if everything you're saying is true, this isn't the answer. She needs to be in a facility with proper care, not chained in our basement. Claire laughed harshly. A facility? With what money, Ben? Do you know how much those places cost? We barely afford our mortgage, and even if we could afford it, she'd just be released again in a few months when the state decides she's no longer a danger. This way, I can monitor her. I can make sure she takes her medication. I can keep our family safe. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. Claire moved faster than I expected, grabbing my phone from my hand and throwing it against the wall where it shattered. No, Ben, think about Sophie. Think about what this will do to her. Her mother arrested. This all over the news. Everyone knowing what our family is. Is that what you want for our daughter? The manipulation was so blatant, it almost made me laugh. What I want is for my daughter to grow up in a house that isn't a prison. What I want is to not be complicit in whatever the hell this is. I moved toward the stairs, but Claire blocked my path again. Ben, if you call the police, I'll say you knew. I'll say you helped build this room, that you were part of this from the beginning. Who do you think they'll believe? The devoted wife and mother, or the husband who somehow never noticed his sister-in-law was locked in his basement? The threat was clear, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. She'd been planning for this possibility, preparing her story. You're bluffing. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Am I? I have emails to contractors about the renovation, all sent from your email address. I have bank statements showing withdrawals from our joint account to pay for the construction. I've been very careful, Ben. If this comes out, we both go down. I looked at Eleanor, who was watching this exchange with growing horror. She's lying, Eleanor said. She's manipulating you like she manipulates everyone. That's what Claire does. She makes you think you're complicit, makes you think you have no choice but to go along with her plans. I saw the truth in Eleanor's words. This was what Claire did. This was how she'd convinced me we needed a bigger house. How she'd convinced me Sophie needed to be homeschooled before kindergarten. How she'd shaped our entire life through gentle manipulation that only looked obvious in hindsight. I made a decision. Eleanor, I'm going to get you out of here. I don't care what Claire threatens or what she's framed me for. This ends now. I moved toward Eleanor to unlock the chain around her ankle. Claire screamed and launched herself at me. We went down hard, her nails raking across my face. I'd never seen her violent before, never seen this side of her. She was clawing at my eyes, trying to grab the keys from my pocket, all pretense of rationality gone. I managed to push her off and scrambled backward. Eleanor was screaming for me to help her, pulling against the chain. Claire stood between me and Eleanor, breathing hard, her hair wild, her eyes showing something unhinged. You don't get to take her, she hissed. You don't get to ruin everything I've built. Do you know how hard I've worked to keep this family safe? How many nights I've come down here to make sure she hasn't found a way to kill herself and leave me with the guilt? I pulled myself up using the wall, my face bleeding from where she'd scratched me. This isn't about keeping anyone safe, Claire. This is about control. This is about you never dealing with your trauma and turning Eleanor into a scapegoat for everything wrong in your life. Claire's face twisted with rage. You think you understand trauma? You grew up in a normal family with normal problems. You have no idea what it's like to have your entire world destroyed by someone you love, to know that the monster you're afraid of shares your DNA. Eleanor's voice cut through the tension. I'm not a monster anymore, Claire. I was sick, and I got help, but you never got help. You just carried all that pain and rage, and now you're the one who's sick. Can't you see that? Claire spun toward Eleanor. Shut up. You don't get to psychoanalyze me. You don't get to pretend you're the victim here. She grabbed one of the books from the table and threw it at Eleanor, who flinched but couldn't dodge, the chain keeping her in place. I used the distraction to rush past Claire and reach Eleanor. I pulled the keys from my pocket and started working on the lock around her ankle. Claire grabbed my shoulders and tried to pull me back, but I shoved her away harder than I meant to. She fell, hitting her head on the concrete floor with a sickening crack. For a moment, everything stopped. Eleanor and I stared at Claire's motionless body, watching for movement. Then Claire groaned and sat up, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. You hurt me, she said, her voice small and childlike. You actually hurt me. I got the chain unlocked, and Eleanor immediately scrambled off the bed, staying as far from Claire as the small room allowed. We need to get out of here, Eleanor said. She's going to call the police and say you attacked her. That's what she does. She makes herself the victim. Claire was struggling to stand, one hand pressed to her bleeding head. Ben, wait, let's talk about this. We can fix this. We can get Eleanor proper help together. Please don't throw our marriage away over this. I looked at my wife and felt nothing but pity and revulsion. Our marriage was already over. I just didn't know it until today. I helped Eleanor up the stairs, supporting her weight as she wobbled on legs that hadn't walked freely in 3 years. Claire followed, still pleading. Ben, think about Sophie. Think about what divorce will do to her. Sophie. The name was like ice water. I'd told her to stay in her room, but how long would she stay there? What had she heard of this confrontation? I needed to get Eleanor to safety and then deal with my daughter, who was probably terrified. We emerged into the kitchen and I grabbed my car keys from the counter. Claire was right behind us, still talking, still trying to manipulate the situation. If you leave, I'll tell everyone you were part of this. I'll say Eleanor seduced you, and you were planning to run away with her. I'll make your life hell." Eleanor laughed, a sound somewhere between hysteria and genuine amusement. "You really can't help yourself, can you, Claire? You can't stop manipulating even when it's obviously not working anymore." She turned to me. "Take me to the police station. Let me tell them everything. Whatever she's framed you for, we'll deal with it together. But I need to be free of her. I need to be somewhere she can't reach me." I nodded and started toward the front door, but then I heard Sophie's voice from upstairs. "Daddy, what's happening?" I heard yelling. My blood ran cold. Claire immediately shifted her expression, arranging her face into something maternal and concerned. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just a grown-up conversation. You can come down." I looked at Eleanor, saw the fear in her eyes, and made a decision. "Sophie, stay upstairs. I'm coming to you." Claire moved to block the stairs. "No, she deserves to know what's happening in her own house. She deserves to know that Daddy is breaking up our family." I pushed past her and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. Sophie stood in the hallway, her small face pale and frightened. I knelt down to her level. "Bug, I need you to pack a bag. Your favorite clothes, your stuffed rabbit, anything you absolutely need. Can you do that for me right now?" She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Are we leaving, Mommy?" The question broke my heart. "Just for tonight. We need to go somewhere else for a little while." Sophie ran to her room, and I heard her opening drawers, moving with the efficiency of a child who'd been waiting for this moment. I went to our bedroom and grabbed my wallet, my backup phone from the nightstand drawer, and some clothes. When I came back out, Sophie was there with her backpack, looking small and lost. Claire appeared at the top of the stairs, Eleanor behind her. For a moment, I thought Claire would physically try to stop us, but she just stood there, blood still dripping from her forehead, her expression something between rage and desperation. "If you leave with our daughter, Ben, I will fight you for custody with everything I have. I will tell them you're unstable, that you attacked me, that you're not safe around children." I picked up Sophie, who wrapped her arms around my neck and buried her face in my shoulder. "Do what you need to do, Claire, but this ends today." I carried Sophie down the stairs, Eleanor following close behind. We made it to the front door and I paused, looking back one last time at the house that had been our home, that had been hiding this horror. Claire stood in the kitchen doorway, small and alone, and for just a moment, I saw the 12-year-old girl who'd witnessed her parents' murder, who'd never been given the help she needed, who'd grown up carrying trauma that had poisoned everything she touched. But that moment of sympathy passed, because she'd made choices. She'd chosen to imprison her sister rather than get proper help. She'd chosen to hide this from me. She'd chosen to let our daughter grow up in a house built on lies and cruelty. I walked out into the evening air, feeling Sophie trembling against me, Eleanor limping beside us, and I didn't look back. We got into my car, and I locked the doors immediately, checking the mirrors to make sure Claire wasn't following. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window like she couldn't believe she was really outside. Sophie whispered against my neck, "Is that the sad lady from the basement?" I adjusted the rearview mirror so I could see her face. "Yes, Bug. This is your Aunt Eleanor. She's going to be safe now." Sophie looked at Eleanor with those serious blue eyes. "You don't have to be sad anymore. Daddy fixes things." Eleanor started crying silently, tears streaming down her thin face. I started the car and drove toward the police station, already mentally preparing for the interrogation, the investigations, the nightmare of legal proceedings that would follow. My phone buzzed with texts from Claire, dozens of them coming in rapid succession. Threats, pleas, promises to get help, accusations of abandonment. I handed the phone to Eleanor. "Everything she sends, we're keeping as evidence." The police station was lit up against the darkening sky. I parked and turned to Eleanor. "Are you ready for this?" She nodded, squaring her shoulders despite her obvious exhaustion and fear. "I've been ready for 3 years. Let's end this." We walked in together, Sophie holding my hand, Eleanor walking on her own now despite the pain. The desk sergeant looked up, and his eyes widened at Eleanor's appearance, the stained nightgown, the raw wound around her ankle, the obvious signs of prolonged neglect. I spoke clearly and calmly. "My name is Ben Harper. This is Eleanor Danvers. She's been held prisoner in my basement for 3 years by my wife, Claire Harper. We're here to report a crime and request protective custody for Eleanor." The officer stood up immediately, calling for his supervisor. Within minutes, we were surrounded by police, by questions, by the machinery of justice, slowly grinding into motion. Eleanor told her story, showed her injuries, gave them Claire's name and our address. They sent officers to the house immediately. Sophie sat beside me in the waiting area, coloring in a book an officer had given her, seemingly calm, But I knew better. I knew this day would mark her forever, would require years of therapy to process, but at least she would grow up knowing that when something is wrong, you speak up. When someone is suffering, you don't look away. When the truth is ugly, you still face it. 2 hours later, they told me Claire had been arrested without incident. She'd been sitting in the kitchen waiting for them, her packed bag beside her, already playing the role of the misunderstood caregiver who'd been doing her best in an impossible situation. The detective assigned to the case, a tired-looking woman named Delgado, sat across from me in an interview room. "Mr. Harper, I need to be straight with you. Your wife has implicated you in the confinement. She's claiming you knew about Eleanor, that you helped construct the room, that you were a willing participant." I nodded, having expected this. "I have a 7-year-old daughter who drew a picture today that showed me something was wrong. That was the first moment I knew Eleanor existed. Everything before today, Claire hid from me. Check my work schedule, my credit card statements, my phone records. You'll see I was never around when the construction happened. Never made purchases related to keeping Eleanor captive." Detective Delgado studied me carefully. "Your daughter's drawing is actually good evidence. Kids don't usually lie in their art, but you understand we have to investigate thoroughly. This is a complicated case with serious allegations on both sides." I understood. I also understood that the next few months would be hell, but necessary hell. The truth would come out eventually. Over the following weeks, the investigation uncovered everything. The contractors who'd built the room identified Claire as the only person they'd dealt with, paid in cash to avoid a paper trail. Eleanor's medical records showed she'd been stable and medication compliant when released from the hospital. Witnesses came forward placing Eleanor in public right before she disappeared, and then never again. Claire's computer revealed searches for sedatives, for soundproofing materials, for how to care for someone long-term in a confined space. The story made national news. "Suburban mother keeps sister imprisoned in basement" was the headline that followed us everywhere. Eleanor was hospitalized, treated for malnutrition and psychological trauma, and slowly began to recover. Sophie started therapy, working through what she'd witnessed, learning that the strange sounds in her house weren't normal, that keeping secrets because someone told you to wasn't always right. I filed for divorce and emergency custody. Claire's attorney tried to paint her as a victim of her own childhood trauma, someone who'd made terrible choices out of fear rather than malice. But the evidence was overwhelming. The chains, the forced medication, the 3-year imprisonment, the trial was excruciating. I had to testify about my ignorance, about how I'd failed to see what was happening in my own home. Claire's defense attorney cross-examined me aggressively, implying I was either complicit or criminally negligent. But the jury saw through it. They saw the chains, heard Eleanor's testimony, listened to Sophie's therapist describe the child's fear. Claire was convicted on multiple counts of false imprisonment, assault, and administering drugs without consent. The judge sentenced her to 15 years. In the courtroom, as the verdict was read, Claire looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not anger, not sadness, something more resigned, like she'd known all along this was how it would end, but had hoped against hope she could maintain the illusion forever. After the sentencing, I never saw her again. Sophie and I moved to a different state, started over somewhere no one knew our story. Eleanor came with us initially, staying in our guest room until she was strong enough to live independently. She got a job at a library, found a small apartment, started rebuilding the life Claire had stolen from her. She sent Sophie books on her birthday and called every Sunday to check in. This aunt who'd been a sad lady in the basement and was now slowly becoming family. Sophie asked me once, years later when she was old enough to really understand why I hadn't known sooner, why I hadn't checked the basement, hadn't questioned Claire's need for privacy, hadn't heard the sounds she'd heard. I told her the truth, that love makes you blind sometimes, that trust can be manipulated, that the people we think we know best can hide the darkest secrets, and we moved through our lives, Sophie and I and Eleanor, connected by trauma but determined not to be defined by it. And sometimes late at night I still heard phantom sounds from below, reminders of what we'd lived through and barely escaped. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.